Mr. Ronald Kayanja has only been in Nigeria 7 months since his appointment by UN Secretary-General Mr. Ban Ki-moon as Director of the United Nations Information Center in Lagos. The Ugandan national has been 15 years an information officer with the UN in the Philippines, the Syrian Arab Republic, his native Uganda, Zambia and Timor-Leste. Before working with the UN, he was a director at the Panos Institute and worked about a decade as a journalist. Needless to say, he was very comfortable in front of the camera. So our conversation begins with his views on the UN as it turns 70.
Now,
thank you for having me.
70 years of the United Nations, that has got to be, it's a thing of pride, so congratulations are in order.
Thank you.
What's it like being part of such a historical, iconic world body?
Well, I must say I feel lucky to be in the United Nations at this time when we are celebrating 70 years of this organization. But I also feel an enormous challenge on our back as the UN, because the UN was formed in 1945 after a devastating world war. And one of the major reasons was so that that will not happen again. So that the world will enjoy peace, the world will enjoy stability and security. The record is good on one hand because we haven't had a world war since. The record is bad because since we've had so many bad things happen in the world. We've had conflicts, civil strife, we've had international strife, we've had genocide in Rwanda, we've had something near to genocide in the Balkans. Now we are having insurgencies, we are having terrorism and so on. But we can say that because of the UN and the people we are working with, the world is a much better place than 1945 in terms of how lives have improved, life expectancy has improved, education has improved, health standards have improved. Many things that we do together as nations have improved. So on the one hand, we've made progress. On the other hand, there are many challenges.
Yeah, you speak more of the challenges that the UN has had, but I'm sure that there has been a lot of progress. So let's talk about that. Apart from, peace building and so on, the UN has done some good.
Most people, when you talk about the UN, they think about peacekeeping. They think about the blue helmets, as we call them. But probably our most single important involvement in the world is development. All the agencies we talk about, we know about that work for the UN when you think of UNICEF, UNDP, UNIDO, UNODC, and all the others are working on development. And their contribution in terms of improving life expectancy has been immense. Their contribution in terms of reducing poverty globally has been immense. And remember, within the 70 years, the world population has more than doubled, in fact, more than tripled. We are now talking of 7 billion people. The good news is that the recent World Bank report, as it says, less than 10% of this population is living in abject poverty. That is a major improvement. Many of the countries that were under colonialism in 1945 are no longer. In Africa, in fact, the only country that is being discussed at the UN in terms of decolonization is the so-called Sahrawi Republic. The challenge that we have there is the only. Before that, many of the countries, including Nigeria, were not independent. So that is big progress of the UN and the peoples of the world. We've made a lot of progress, but yet the challenges persist.
But when the UN was first formed, the aim actually was to prevent another world war. Yeah. Now, unfortunately, there have been other pockets of violence and conflicts within regions and amongst countries. So it means that the UN is still a work in progress.
The UN is really a conglomeration of the member states with the peoples. So the UN is not like an organization standing there and looking at the peoples. The UN is a compilation of all these countries, even the countries that are now at war. You see, the UN gives us an opportunity to work together to resolve our problems. And problems keep changing. We never had a challenge of terrorism as we have it today. But now that we have it, you need the UN for people to come together to deal with it. That is one of the reasons the UN was formed. If you look at the charter, where it says the purposes for which the UN was formed, the last part of the purposes says for the UN to provide a framework or an opportunity for the peoples of the world to achieve these objectives. So whenever there is a threat to peace, the UN gives an opportunity for people to come together to deal with it. It doesn't mean that the problems will not be there. The problems will be there, but the UN gives you the framework for you to deal with them. Now we have this problem of terrorism. We have the problem of the conflicts going on, especially in the Middle East. Yes, the UN is another avenue for us to deal with them.
And so you say that the UN provides a framework, an opportunity for countries to discuss, their differences and so on. So what's the UN's position on the crisis going on in the Middle East between Israel and Palestine?
If you remember in the latest General Assembly in September, the Palestinian flag was raised for the first time, not as a member state of the United Nations, but with observer status. Our hope is that sooner than later, the two-state solution that is being talked about all the time will happen. And this is probably a gesture to the world of what the United Nations thinks about the Palestinian people. The agenda of the UN on the Palestinian people has been there for many years. And UNESCO actually was the first agency that lifted the flag of Palestine at its headquarters in Paris. Of course, there are disagreements and there are positions of member states on issues like this. But I think most member states would agree that the best solution to have peace in that region is the two-state solution. The earlier we achieve it, the better, so that there is peace for the people in that region.
And what is the UN's position on the fight against Boko Haram in Nigeria?
Of course, the UN condemns in uncertain terms what Boko Haram does to the common person, the defenseless people. Maiming and killing innocent Nigerians is something the UN does not at all recommend, or it's something that we condemn in the strongest terms. But we know that on many of these things, there are what you can call underlying reasons. So we always say that in order to deal with this, and the government's position is similar, we have to see the underlying causes of this. Youth unemployment, impoverishment, radicalization, regional context of the problem, because Boko Haram is no longer a Nigeria problem, and it's probably no longer a Sahelian or a regional problem. It's a global problem. It links into Al-Shabaab, it links into ISIS. So the global community, and this is where the UN again comes in, the global community should work with Nigeria, and that's what we are doing to deal with it. So the UN really hopes that the good steps taken by the regional countries actually are paying off for now, but we hope more is being done, not only to defeat Boko Haram, but also to help people that have been displaced. You have more than 1.5 million people displaced from their homes because of this problem. The lives they are living, we need to support them. We need to give them humanitarian assistance. These are things that the UN is concerned about.
So do you support the approach that the Nigerian government announced a few days ago that it would be considering, which is negotiating with Boko Haram members?
You see, you have two elements there. You have elements of a member state, that is Nigeria, taking decision on how to deal with an issue. Of course, we will always support a member state of the United Nations that finds a way of bringing peace to the country. But the second challenge you have is the UN is an organization of member states. So while Nigeria is a member state of the United Nations, Boko Haram is not anything that we consider as a state or an actor that we can consider as a state. So it becomes difficult for us in the UN so we deal with states. But if a member state has mechanisms of dealing with this, it is a position we will support.
There's more up ahead in our discussion with Mr. Kayanja. Please stay with us.